We are talking to Dr. Bruce Robinson, Professor of Medicine in Western Australia, a specialist doctor working with respiratory conditions, and done a lot of research, 250 papers to be precise, spoken at conferences all over the world, and he's written many books. And I'm going to talk about his fatherhood books, but before I do, tell us about this new book you've got, Bruce, and maybe tell us about the shirt you're wearing before you tell us that.
Well, the shirt is, just by coincidence, it happens to be my football club. I'm a patron of one of the Western Australian rules football clubs, not the AFL ones, the ones in the West Australian Footy League. I played for them when I was young, and they asked me to be patron, and I'm just wearing the shirt, and it's a job that I love, actually. In terms of the book, yeah, it's a book about suffering, and like most things in my life, Warwick, it came out of my work as a doctor. I have to, because I'm a lung specialist, which you said, I have to break the bad news regularly. I would have done it, I counted the other day, maybe 500 times. Men and women sitting in my office, holding hands, waiting for the news, and I have to tell them, you know, it's cancer and we can't fix it. You know, they sit there and cry and all that sort of stuff, and I've done a lot of that. And it's the most poignant thing I do in my career, and obviously the most poignant thing they're ever going to hear in their life. I imagine if it was you and your wife sitting in front of me, and you know, everyone cries, and you know, and so I've done that journey with people, and people want to hear from me what it's like, and so I wrote a book about what it's like, you know, how you can cope with it, how you can survive bad news and suffering, why does God allow it, and then finally how you can grow from it, you know. What doesn't kill you can make you a better person or a worse person. So I wrote this book. If anyone's interested in it, it's on my personal.
Wave it for us. Wave the book.
Yeah, it's on my. It's called Behind the Tears, and you can just go to my personal website, brucerobinson.com.au, and there's a suffering thing. If they want it, they can have a, you know, get it through that.
Yeah, Bruce, and you've also written a number of books. You started the Fathering Project in West Australia, which is arguably Australia's biggest fathering organisation, helping dads be better dads. But you released this book, which we use in our courses, called Fathering from the Fast Lane. And then you followed up, I think, 5 or 6 years later, or maybe 7 or 8 years later, with this book here, Daughters and Their Dads, which I think is utterly brilliant. And, you know, there's a story behind these books, which is similar to this last book you've just written. Tell me, why did you write that first book about fathering in 2001? It was a bestseller, by the way. It still is arguably one of the best-selling books on fatherhood in Australia today.
Yeah, well, Warwick, it is a similar thing. I sit in my room and I tell blokes they're going to die. And I'm one of these doctors that spends time with people and listens to them, and I don't sort of handball them on to the oncologist. I stay with them on the journey, and they start to talk. And they would talk about if they had their life all over again, like, what are their big regrets? And number one, always, was that wish they'd been a better dad and spent more time with their kids. But they said, I wish someone had helped me when I was a young dad to realise this, and now it's too late. And I've had blokes in my consulting room weeping, Warwick, weeping because it's too late. They can't get the time back again. So I wrote this book, honestly, not expecting it to become a bestseller. And from that, the Fathering Project was born. And the other book about daughters, actually quite makes me laugh, really, because I was at a party and all these women, I don't know, it was Jackie and I were there, and they were asking, what's your next book? I said, I don't know, I don't have a plan to write one. And they said, well, you need to write about daughters and their dads, Bruce, because men don't understand their daughters. I said, really? And they said, let's show you. So they one by one called their husband over. And they said, oh, this is Bruce, you know, What do you think daughters need from their dads? What do you reckon it is? None of them could answer it. That was how they convinced me, Warwick. So I wrote this book, and again, it has had a profound impact.
And you've come up with a very simple, a 3-point plan to become a better dad. Can you tell us about it and how it came to you?
Yeah, well, when I was writing my first book, I read hundreds of papers. I mean, I'm a scientist, so everything I write, I want to make sure it's, you know, statistically proven. I can defend any points I make. But I thought there are some common themes here. So I sat down and I looked at them all, and I realised there were 3 things. that dads, that the things, I mean, dads, you say, what do your kids need from you? And they say, oh yeah, discipline and, you know, love and all that sort of stuff. But when I did all the research, I realized there's something a little bit deeper. And the three things, and you mentioned the word bus, they make up the word bus. And you want me to tell you that, tell the blokes?
Hey, we want to know, man. Come, there's a whole bunch of guys listening tonight that need to know this. They might be listening to the day or the night, whatever it is, but they need to know this.
Yeah, so the first, well, actually, when I talk to dads at schools, that's exactly what they say. They say, okay, Bruce, this is great, but give us something we can do tomorrow morning when we wake up. That's the value of keeping it simple. B, the B of bus stands for being there. And part of that is time with your kids. And a lot of that first book was about how to create time with your kids in a busy life. But the other B, and it's a really important one that a lot of blokes don't get, is to be there for your kids. The kids need to know that you'll be there for them when they need you. And we can talk more about that later on if you like. The second one is unconditional love, which is quite different to love. So I love my kids, but unconditional love is very hard in our modern competitive society. Whether it's the kids' academic awards or their sporting ability or their behaviour or their beliefs, it's very hard for dads to convey to their kids that their love for them has no conditions. Nothing they can do or say or any trouble they get into is ever going to destroy your love for them. It is unconditional. And that is a very, very difficult but deep concept to convey to your kids. And again, just like being there, dads have to say it. Dads have to say it because the kids just don't know for sure. The S stands for helping kids realize that they're special. Every kid is special. I was looking at a bunch of gum trees. We were camping last year. I looked at these gum trees on the other side of the river and I thought, every single gum tree has got a different shape and different leaves. Human beings are like that. Kids are like that. They're all unique. And because they're unique, they're special. And it's so important for dads to communicate to kids that they are uniquely special and to treat them as special. And I'll finish just by saying, you know, the one tip, when they say, give me one thing I can do to achieve that, I say, well, one-on-one times, dad dates, you know, take your kids out one at a time for a dad date. And if you can, take them with you on a trip, just dad trips. But the key thing is, no other dad, not mum, and not all the kids. It's just dad and just one kid. It's one-on-one. And that kid looks at dad and says, my dad's busy. He could be doing anything, but he chooses to spend time with me. I must be worth spending time with, and that is what wins. Specialness and worth. So they're the three things. Bus, they are brilliant. They work all the time. Every single time those three things work, Warwick.
Look, I'm a convert, you know, because you feature in our first Good to Great course we started in 2004, and that's been seen by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men across Australia, and you've inspired hundreds of men with that story, and your book, I believe, has inspired tens of thousands, actually. But this being there, just you didn't finish that totally, that first B. You added something to the B. What was it?
Well, it's about being there for your kids. I think time management, work-life balance, we all talk about that, and that my book deals with that. But I think guys forget about being there for your kids. And I tell you, when I was thinking about it when I was writing the book, and I went to a lecture in my hospital. It was a lecture about teenage suicide, desperately sad, by someone who was an expert. And she said, and she read out a teenage suicide note, and it said, there's just no one on my side. There's just no one on my side. And I thought, I got up when I finished, I walked home and I thought, I don't mind being on my kids' case if they're, you know, rude to their mum or something, but they need to know I'm always on their side. And so from that day on, I decided to make sure they knew I would always be there for them. And my oldest son, Warwick, used to get into trouble. You know, he was a bit of a lad, great bloke now, but he was a bit of a lad. And I said to him one day, mate, if I get a phone call and you're in jail, you need to know something. I will not ring the police commissioner, who he knows was a friend of mine. I will not ring him to get you out. But I'll bring my sleeping bag and I'll sleep on the floor of the jail with you. I will always be there for you, mate.
Wow. So I know of a man, and he loved his kids, and his youngest daughter got divorced, and he told me this story once, and one of the hardest days of his life was he had to go because this guy profoundly believed in marriage, and he believed that marriage was sacred, and obviously he'd hoped that his daughter would stay with her husband, she was married to. He wasn't exactly sort of shall we say, a nice bloke. But I guess many of us aren't nice. You talk to my wife, I'm not that nice. But what I was saying is the hardest thing for me, Bruce, was to go and help her move out. For this man to move his daughter out of the house without saying anything, and just be there for her. So it's important, isn't it, to be there for our kids?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've heard some wonderful stories of dads who are there for their kids. And I won't tell all of them, but I mean, just make the point again, Warwick. You have to be explicit. One of the mistakes dads make is they say, "Oh, my kids know I'm always going to be there for them." No, they don't. They don't know for sure. You have to actually say it. They don't know that you love them unconditionally. You have to actually say it. There's nothing you can do that will destroy my love for you. Nothing. You become a drug-addicted prostitute, come home pregnant or whatever, my arms will come around you in love. It's your life, and I may not like what's happening, but I love you unconditionally. My love does not depend on your performance. You have to say it.
You have to say it, yeah. Bruce, you have inspired me many times as I've heard you speak, and I've heard you speak many times, and not just through those videos, but we've been to events and we've done things together. We actually remember that time we ran out the Fatherhood seminar in Parliament House. We had the Deputy Prime Minister, John Anderson, came along. I sat next to Kim Beazley, who was the opposition leader at the time, and there was a few other ministers there, and both sides of Parliament were there. It was, I think, about 15, 20 of us. It wasn't a big gathering, but you gave a seminar. And so, I've been with you and hung out with you, and it's just been a great joy. But getting back to this idea of taking...
I'm going to stop you there because I want to affirm you for a moment. I remember that seminar well. I'd flown in from New Zealand, and I thought I would lobby these parliamentarians and get them to pay more attention to fathering the community. You guys, point the finger, need to pay more attention to fathering in the community. That was I was getting ready to say that. And you sat there and you looked at all these people and you said, thanks for coming. And by the way, you guys have to fly to Canberra. Thanks for all your hard work on the behalf of the community. And you looked at Kim Beazley and said, and Kim, you got 3 daughters and you have to fly from Perth all the time. Thanks so much for doing that for us all, because you love your kids. And I thought, Warwick, you are a gem. You've taught me to not see them as politicians, but to see them as people, be empathic. And I've told that story a number of times, Warwick, and I'm telling it to your listeners tonight. I was very impressed with you at that moment and made a big impact on me.
Actually, and it's very nice of you to say that. Actually, I always remember Kim turned to me that night. He said, Warwick, the divorce rate inside the Parliament is higher than it is outside in the community. And you and I know that those guys, and of course the ladies too now, they're in high pressure positions and they're away from their families a lot of pressure, a lot of expectation. And the divorce rate is it's very, very high. And of course, the sadness that goes with that divorce, the breakup, the fatherlessness, the motherlessness, that turmoil. It's so important for us to show love to these wonderful people, isn't it, Kim?
Yeah, funny you should mention that, because we're actually just about to start, as in the next few days, by coincidence, a thing called Parents in Parliament.
Oh,
and
really?
it's a variation. We have a strong program for fly-in, fly-out dads, because obviously WA has a huge fly-in, fly-out population. We've been asked to do that in the mining sector and all that sort of stuff. And so Parents in Parliament are just another fly-in, fly-out group. And so what we're going to create is a regular kind of thing to help them, a regular weekly 2-minute clip sort of thing to help them with some strategies around that. And that's also going to include strategies for the person at home, half of whom will be dads. Nowadays, half will be mums. And so funny you should mention it. And it's just we're just going to start it. We think it's a way to show our gratitude, I guess. And they've funded us a lot. The federal government's given us a lot of funding over the years, and so we're giving this back for nothing.
That's beautiful, Bruce. And it's you and I know that they need that care. I mean, I was going around 2002, 2003, 2004, particularly those early years of the Dads for Kids, talking to parliamentarians, and obviously I'm asking on behalf of dads for policy and that sort of stuff. And these men and women were telling me stories of their own pain, their own issues with the marriage, and I'm thinking you shouldn't be talking to me because I'm here to talk to you about policy. But I listened to them because they needed someone to listen to. And actually, I was one of the guys that really sort of lobbied, if you like, or advocated for a chaplain in the Parliament. And now there's one chaplain and 2 or 3 unofficial chaplains, and they've got a lady chaplain as well, who are there for the parliamentarians because it's very important. Just want to the story that I love. You told the story. It's a terrible story in one sense, a very sad story about Janis Joplin. You want to tell everyone this story because this is not what not to do, correct?
Yeah, this is a story about unconditional love. Janis Joplin, for the young people, well, I'm sure you know, she was a rock and roll star in the United States. She came from Texas, the Bible Belt of Texas. Anyway, she ran away and she went on rock and roll and sex, drugs, and rock and roll big time. Famous for.
She was a wild lady, by the way.
She was wild, yeah. Anyway, they had a school reunion back in her hometown, and she went and she did flounce around a bit, but and she was embarrassing. Like this is a conservative town, and her parents left town for the day. And it broke my heart when I heard that. I think about the dad who should have run down the street and thrown his arms around her and said, Janis, I don't care what cameras are looking at me. I don't care who's looking at me. I love you, and there's nothing you can do to destroy that love. And by the way, we got a little party planned at this restaurant down the street. Welcome home, Janis sign. Walked down the street with his arm around her. 1 month later, she took her life.
Yeah. Unconditional love. Just say something about it as we close tonight. The power of unconditional love. Now, you have talked a fair bit about it, but it's so important to be said, number one, and also to be experienced. Like you talked, you said if your son was put in jail, you wouldn't lecture him, you wouldn't ring the High Commission, the police commissioner or a judge or a lawyer, but you'd go down with your sleeping bag and sleep the night with your son in the jail, correct?
Yeah, that's more about being there. When I think about unconditional love, yeah, but you're right, I wouldn't dump on him. With unconditional love, I think there's a kind of a spectrum of things. So, for example, you got 2 kids, and one of them's really good at sport, and the other one isn't. Or one's really smart, and the other one isn't. Or one's really pretty, the other one isn't. Or one's really nice, the other one isn't. Or one's, like a leader, and the other one's always in trouble. It's easy for that second one to think, very easy for them to think, that if only they were more like their brother and sister, you'd love them. Because you're always trying to help them. And it's very easy for kids to think that your love is conditional. But they're the kind of sanitized things, Warwick. Academic performance, sporting performance, behavior. Where it gets harder, and I've noticed this recently, where one of their kids might be gay and their parents, just doesn't sit comfortably with them. And so they're not sure how to tell their parents. I've had a pastor, a senior pastor, have that happen. And so unconditional love, remember, it's not agreeing with everybody. It's just loving people without condition. It's a very deep concept to love people without condition. And this applies to things that are socially uncomfortable. And you mentioned one, divorce, so, it's not a nice topic. It's not a nice topic. Your kids are gay, or there's, transgender, or whatever. Criminals are in jail, they're drug pushers. These are things that are deeply uncomfortable socially. And I'm sorry to say that I have, again, I won't say too much, I don't want to identify the person, but he was a high-profile person, and his daughter was in the emergency department, alcohol poisoning, I think some drugs, I don't really know. And he snuck in the back door and took her out through the back door so no one would see him. And I thought, oh, look, again, I don't want to sound judgmental, Warwick, but unconditional love means you march through the front door and say, look, it's my son, my daughter, I don't care what people think of me, I just love you so much. And when they see you doing that, you know, you don't care about the rest of it. You just love them without conditions, and you'll pick them up, put your arm around them and take them home any time of the day or night without saying anything.
Yeah, yeah. So in 30 seconds, dads are listening to you. What would you say to them in 30 seconds? What would you say to them? I know you said a lot. I'm not saying, like, what you've said is beautiful. Get on the bus. Be there for your kids. Be there for them. Be there with them, okay? Not just quantity time, but quality time. You can't get quality time without quantity time, correct? Unconditional love, and make your children feel special, because if you don't, someone else will. It's important that you do it first. You make sure that you make your children feel special. What would you say, Tho, in 30 seconds?
I can say it in about 10 seconds. Dads, get your diaries out and write things in your diary. For example, special dad date. Write it in your diary. If you've got 5 kids, that's 5 different dad dates. And I said about being there in unconditional love, you've got to tell them. So write that in your diary. Tell each of the kids at some appropriate time that you'll always be there for them. Tell them, especially when they're in trouble, that nothing will destroy your love for them. And they need to know that. And if they say, oh, I know that, Dad, say, that's fine. That's fine. I just want to make it really, really clear. You know, I was listening to a webinar and they told me to do this, so I'm doing it, you know. Get your diary out and write it in there. It's my tip. That's what I do.
Bruce Robinson, you are a legend and you're a very good friend of mine, and you also support in all of this. You actually even support Dads for Kids financially, and I do appreciate that. It's very humbling, by the way, to receive that support and that kindness.
I love what you do, Warwick, honestly.
Well, thank you. And look, again, thank you, Bruce, for talking to us tonight. We honour you. Please give our love from Warwick Marsh and Alison Marsh to your beautiful wife. And again, God bless you and all your wonderful work.
Thanks, mate. Lovely chatting. See you later.
All the best.